All right, I've got a pretty loud voice. Can everybody hear me in the back? Okay, good. I'm gonna get rid of this thing. So, all right, so thanks guys for letting me come. So what I'm gonna do is not more of a traditional tech talk. Instead, what I want to do is I wanna tell you guys about kind of real quick what engineering is, but more importantly, how you guys can get into engineering, right? I know a lot of times when you're going through your looking at schools, your career planning, you kind of have a general idea what you want to do and you know that you need to go to college to get there, but there's a lot of details that can kind of get lost. So before we start, can I ask a quick question? Who here is considering being an engineer? Do I have anyone? All right, what's your name?
Dean.
Dean, and why do you want to be an engineer?
I think it would be pretty good it would be an interesting career for me to choose, and it pays well.
That's a great answer. I admit that openly. When I was in your position, I was taking chemistry at this, because I actually went here. I was taking chemistry at this school, and chemical engineering was the highest paying engineering, and that's why I chose chemical engineering, no other reason. So that is a perfectly valid reason. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
I'm really interested in chemical engineering because of how there's so many different things you can do with it, and there's so many different fields that you can just play around with, and that a lot of the future depends on engineering and innovative people.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Chemical engineering specifically, obviously I'm biased, right, because I am a chemical engineer, but you're absolutely correct, and in terms of the number of fields you can do. And what's actually funny about chemical engineering is there's actually a surprisingly small amount of chemistry actually involved in chemical engineering. It's really more process-based. I mean, obviously you need to know your chemistry, don't get me wrong, but most of what I do on a daily basis, I don't use that much chemistry in the grand scheme of things, right, compared to like what a chemist would be doing with beakers. So, did I have any other? I saw a couple of hands went up. Yes, sir.
I just like building stuff and solving problems.
Fair enough. Great answer. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So I'll give you a quick rundown of who I am. So, this is me. This is what I actually wear to work every morning. We go in the factory, and my official job title, or I used to be a process engineer. Now I manage the process engineering for my group. But we go in and we actually work in the factory is what we call it, the fab. So like you said, I earned my bachelor's in 2004. I got my Ph.D. in 2008. But more importantly, and the thing Paul's stating there is I went to Sunset High School. I graduated in 2000. I realized that dates me, and that's okay. So I started I've been with Intel my entire career. I interned there. Or my entire professional career, I should say. I interned there and took the group leader job in 2012, which is what I still have. So, yep. All right, so what is an engineer? Actually, we already kind of got the answer. So you kind of answered it. What was your name again, sorry? Dean. So Dean gave us a pretty good answer. He said he liked solving problems. So you can give me 2 clicks, please. That's fundamentally what engineers are, right? Aside from being good at math and science and playing around with toys, we solve problems, right? We are problem solvers, and the reason we're employed, or you will eventually be employed, is because you're solving problems that no one else has ever solved before, right? If we could go to Wikipedia and look up the answer, your company has no reason to pay you a lot of money to be there. They're just going to do that, bring in maybe a high schooler, and look it up on Wikipedia and solve the problem, right? So you guys that's what's really cool about your job, is you guys are going to be solving stuff that no one else has solved before. And what's even cooler about you guys, most of you guys will actually be working in careers and jobs that don't maybe even exist yet, right? That's kind of cool. Okay, so engineers obviously have a solid understanding of fundamental physics, chemistry. That's why a lot of people, who's ever been told you're really good at math and science and you should be an engineer, right? There's at least a couple of you out there, right? So, but we also act as the bridge between scientific discoveries and actually making an application, right? So engineers, of course, know science, but we use that science to actually do something with it, right? So we're not fundamentally we're not the Sheldon Coopers of the universe, right? We're fundamentally looking at what those guys come up with, and then we're applying it to a real product, right? I make stuff that goes into the phones and the computers that you guys use, right? That's pretty cool. At the end of the day, I have a real product on something that I worked on. Okay? And engineers, here's the warning. Engineers will look at the world differently than other people do. Once you get your engineering education, Dean, you're not going to be able to look at a sunset anymore and be like, oh, that's pretty. You're going to be like, oh, I know the reason that works that way. And you're not going to be able to look at other stuff, right? You are forever cursed with knowledge. Okay? So engineering is a rewarding career because, again, Dean stole all my thunder, right? Engineers really enjoy solving problems, right? That's what's going to keep you going to work when you're 40 or 50 and you already have all the money you need and you're not doing that anymore. You're going to keep going because you like what you do. Right? Engineers, although they work hard, tend to have a large amount of job satisfaction. And why do we think that is? Why do I still like my job? Why do I still go work, 60, 80 hours a week, get yelled at sometimes by upper management? Why do I still go to work?
There's always something new to solve.
There's always something new to solve. That's an excellent answer. Give me a couple clicks, please. Well, I'll go ahead and go to the next slide, actually. But yes, financially rewarding. So if we go to the next slide, and these numbers are a little dated. These are from 2012. But if we look at the average starting salary for new graduates, engineering, number 1. Engineering is the top paid, followed very closely by computer science, which, let's be honest, is very close to engineering. And then we have business. There's a pretty big gap there, right? We've got roughly 62 to 54. Health sciences, communication, math and science, and then all the humanities down at the bottom, okay? So the best thing you can do for now to be clear, this is bachelor's, right? This does not count those who go on and get masters, which actually significantly changes the pool because a lot of engineers will come out with bachelor's because you get paid a lot, so why go get extra education, okay? But engineering pays really well. Next slide, please. All right, so does anybody know how many different fields of engineering there are? Did I hear too many? That's actually a good answer, right? There's a lot. I actually don't know how many there are. I think there's actually an official number as recognized by like the US Jobs Bureau. But the answer is there's a lot. Okay, next slide, please. So we're actually going to go out of order. I'm starting with step 2, which is earning your engineering degree. And you'll hopefully understand why I start out of order first. But if you want to go be an engineer, what do you need to do first? Dean, can you come work for me tomorrow?
No.
Why not?
I don't have the education or the experience to do so.
Right. So you may have the intelligence. You probably do have the intelligence to do it, right? But you don't have the experience and you don't have the education. You don't have the practice, right? So what you guys need to go do first is earn your engineering degree. So a bachelor's degree in an engineering field is required if you guys want to be an engineer, right? I think that makes sense. They're not going to hire you to do any job. Well, not any job. They're not going to hire you to do most jobs without appropriate training and appropriate background in that, right? So you need to go get a degree in engineering. At most institutions, most undergraduate institutions, it's going to be a 4-year program. Do I have any seniors in the group? Oh, a bunch. Wow. So is anybody going in engineering? For the seniors? None of the seniors? You are? What's your name? Ethan? Where are you going, Ethan? Princeton? And you're going to major in engineering at Princeton? Awesome. Nice. Congrats. So why did you choose to go into engineering?
Why?
Yeah.
So both like the job opportunities and also I'm interested in math and science and I like solving math problems.
Okay, great. So are you a 4-year program, Princeton's, or a 5-year program?
4-year.
It is 4-year? Okay. So there are select schools out there that actually have 5-year programs, but those come with a caveat of they'll actually stick you in like a job. They call them different things, but it's basically an internship of sorts, generally second semester of your junior year and then first semester of what would be your senior year. So that year of work in some fashion, usually over the summer, will actually replace a year of education. So even though you'll be in a 5-year program, you're not actually in school for 5 years. So if you guys are looking at schools and other places promise to get you an engineering degree in like 2 years or an engineering degree in like 6 years, you need to definitely evaluate your options because most can get it done in 4 years. And that's less money that you guys have to pay when you're in school. Okay? And no matter what type of engineer you want to be, and like we said, there's a bunch, the first couple years of your education are all going to be roughly the same. You guys are going to start with math, you're going to start with science, you're going to start with chemistry, you're going to start with physics, right? After that, you're going to become more specialized. So if you go to the next slide, please. So what I have up here is a typical, this is actually from Tulane University. I just pulled their current curriculum for chemical engineering. And what you see is stuff that doesn't necessarily apply directly to chemical engineers. We have Gen Chem, general physics, calculus, a writing course, and their tides, that's like an elective. Okay, so is there anything on there that basically screams engineering? The answer is no. But once we go to the second year, what we start to see is a little bit of specialization. We're still taking organic chemistry. That class stinks. You're still taking math. You're taking introduction to applied math, which is math. And then we're starting to get a little bit of specialization with some particular classes. But still, at this point, if you don't know what your major is, it's still okay. You can still kind of be in a couple different areas. By the time you go to your third year, you'd better know what you need to do, right? Because what's going to happen is you are almost completely specialized. If you look at this, it's thermonumerical methods for chemical engineering. That's pretty specialized towards chemical engineering, transport and stuff like that. So you're going to need to know, no matter what you're in, by about the end of about midway through your second year, what major you want to do. And the reason for that's simple, right? A lot of engineering classes or programs are very specialized and they go in order. So you'll be taking certain classes first semester, certain classes second semester, and they may not offer those classes both semester at your institution. So if you miss one of those classes and have to go back and do it again, it might actually cost you another whole year of school. And you and or your parents or whomever probably don't want to pay for another whole year of school. Okay? And then in your last year, the cool thing about the last year is if you look at this, there's actually not as many classes on there, and your time is very short, but that's because you are doing an engineering project. Any engineering program that is accredited and gives a legitimate engineering degree has to do what we call a capstone project. That capstone project is you essentially going out in industry. So for myself, I was in a 4-man team. We were paired up with, I believe it was Shell. They didn't tell us what company it was, but we kind of figured it out. And our job was we had crude oil that was off the coast of Africa, and that crude that was coming up out of the ground would actually solidify in the sea temperature. The sea temperature was so cold that the crude would come up and it would solidify and they couldn't pump it back to shore. So we had to find a way for them to get it back to shore. I ran into a friend who has a daughter at Tulane. She graduated last year. She's a biomedical engineer. Their project was actually, they ended up making a diaper that had a sensor in it that could measure wetness. And that seems kind of silly, but if you think about it from like a nursing home perspective, instead of having a nurse going around and checking patients for wet beds every hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, instead you can just have one nurse stationed at like a kiosk, and as soon as the sensor goes off, they can go help that individual, right? So now we've already improved the efficiency, we've reduced the head count that we need, and we can hopefully reduce costs and improve care, right? Very simple device. They developed that and they developed that product as part of their senior project. That's pretty cool. They're actually changing the world before they're even officially engineers yet. Okay? All right, so the first step is choosing an engineering school. So how did you choose your school, aside from the fact that it's Princeton?
I have 2 choices. I visited all of them. Princeton was the one I liked the most.
Okay, fair enough. Is anybody else, or any other, well, we had several seniors, unless everybody's going to go work at McDonald's. Somebody else had to choose a school, right? Nobody wants the answer? All right, fair enough. All right, so that's what I want to talk about basically for the rest of this is what you should look for specifically in choosing an engineering school, if that's your pathway that you want. Okay, next slide, please. So during your second and third years, right now, for the seniors, I'm not talking to you guys. You already know where you're going. You've got your life solved, right? But for the sophomores and juniors right now, you guys are probably having way too many people give you their opinion on what you should do. Right? So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to tell you where you should go and where you shouldn't go. Instead, what I want to do is give my advice on what to specifically look for in an engineering school. And that's both for the undergraduate level and the graduate level. Okay? So the biggest thing, the most important thing, is that you need to make a decision that you can be happy with. Not your mom, not your dad, not your counselor. You're the one who has to go there and suffer through 4 years of going to school and working and, right, all the other stuff. Having fun at parties too, right? That is part of a college life. It will help you develop and become a better human being, right? That's a true story. Okay, so you need to find a place that you want to go. Okay, next slide, please. Right, then after you decide where you want to go, you actually have to get in. That's kind of the tricky part, isn't it? Right? A lot of people may not understand. Did you have to apply to your engineering program as well as your school?
No,
You just went in both? Okay, you're lucky. There are a lot of schools out there where you actually have to not only gain admission to the university itself, but you also have to gain admission to the engineering program. The way my school did it, at least back then, was you actually didn't apply to the school at all. You applied to engineering, and then you automatically got into the school. So engineers actually applied separately. So the reason they do that is they're looking for a very specific different skill set out of you guys, the applicants, than they are for just normal, right? It's not just, I mean, obviously they want good grades and SAT scores, that goes without saying, right? But they're not looking just for your good scores. They're looking for people who can go out and want to change the world, people who have shown and demonstrated that they can manage project and manage their own life, okay? One of the best ways to do that is go out and get involved. Who here is taking the engineering classes that they offer? Nobody? Everybody? Not these classes?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, fair enough. So either way, if you're interested in being an engineering student, right, you guys have amazing resources that were not available to me when I went here, right? They've done a great job getting an engineering program off, which is huge, right? So if you guys are interested in engineering, take their classes, right? Very simple way. If you're applying for an engineering school and you have engineering background on your application, they're probably going to look at that, right? Okay, next please. All right, the next one I want to talk to you about is school's reputation. So, Mr. Princeton over here, is Princeton a good school? Kind of, maybe? All right. Anyway, so Princeton obviously has a great reputation. But reputation's not everything, especially when it comes to rankings. So I want to speak to that for just a little bit. So if we go to the next slide, please. So what this is, and this is 2004. This is, what was that? No. All right. So, yeah, well, Princeton's number one, right? But it's number one. This was 2004 rankings. Princeton has the number one best school ranking. But Princeton's engineering ranking is 10. That means there are 9 other engineering schools in the country that have a higher ranking than Princeton, right? Now let's pick on Harvard. I like to pick on Harvard because Harvard is a really good school. I don't think anybody would argue with that. It's world renowned. Harvard is tied for 28th place in engineering. If you want to major in engineering, Harvard's probably not the place for you to go, right? If you want to say I went to Harvard so you can be amazing, go for it. But if you want to go there to major in engineering, that's probably not the right answer. Okay, then we go down. Stanford, of course. Stanford's well known for being a very highly done engineering school. And this little school called MIT, they might be okay at engineering. No, MIT is of course really good. They're top ranked. Next slide, please. Okay, and then if you compare engineering versus overall, the top ranking in engineering is MIT, then Stanford, but then you have UC Berkeley, CIT, Georgia, UIUC, Carnegie Mellon, and all the way down here, not all the way down here, it's still tied for 10th, which is really good. But we have Cornell, Princeton, and then UTA. Okay? So what I want you to take away from this is not what the schools are necessarily, but the fact that national ranking, engineering ranking is all different, right? What you need to do is actually do your research and make sure that what you want is what you're going to get out of your education. Okay? So we go to the next slide, please. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So like I said, I like to pick on Harvard because Harvard is obviously a good school, second ranked in the country for overall rankings, but 28th place in engineering. So is Harvard a cheap school? The answer is no. I actually don't know how much it costs, but I think it's like close to 60, right? It's probably high 50s, okay? What if you could apply, and it's also really hard to get into Harvard, right? I've heard, okay? What if you could apply to a school that was significantly easier to get into, was going to cost you 15 to 20 less per year, and was actually a higher ranked engineering school? Does that sound like a better answer? Yeah, it's a better answer for everything except for being able to put Harvard on your resume, right? And guess what? People in the engineering world actually know that. So even putting Harvard on your resume and applying for an engineering job, that's not going to necessarily do you as good, okay? Okay, so again, I'm not saying don't go to Harvard. It's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is make sure that what you're doing is actually what you want. You don't have to commit to Ivy League just because it's an Ivy League school, right? There are other options out there, okay? Next thing I want to speak to is department rankings. This one is a little tricky because an engineering school may be ranked, Princeton's case, Princeton may be ranked 10th, but maybe its chemical engineering is 3, and maybe it's mechanical engineering, right? So if you want to, and I'm not saying those are the actual rankings, I'm just throwing it out there, right? So if you want to go to like the top ranked, if you say you want to go to MIT, but you want to go be a civil engineer, you could actually go to a higher ranked department. Because if we look at this, right, top school for chemical, mechanical, and computer is MIT, but the top for civil is Berkeley, the top for bio is Johns Hopkins, and the top environmental is Stanford, right? So if you want to be an environmental engineer, maybe you want to look at Stanford instead, right? That's all I'm saying. So make sure to do your research and make sure that what you're doing is the right fit for you. Next slide, please. Like I said, do your research. Don't let rankings or your parents' influence or whatever affect your decision. Now, to be fair, if somebody gives you a whopping scholarship somewhere, you should probably do that. But, okay. And then the last thing I want to speak to in choosing school is accreditation. Does anybody know what accreditation is? No seniors? Okay, so accreditation is essentially a board. They go out and they audit these programs to make sure that the programs are actually worth giving you an education. If you're going to pay 50 grand, 60 grand for an education. These guys want to make sure that it's actually worth that. Okay? You need to have a degree from an accredited school in order to be able to take your FE, which is your Fundamentals of Engineering exam, which will eventually let you take your PE, which is Professional Engineering. They will not even let you sit for those exams if you're not from an accredited school. Most employers will not hire you if you are not from an accredited school, right? And one of the tricky things about this is a school may be accredited in chemical engineering and not in mechanical or vice versa, right? That does happen where some departments are certified for most of their stuff, but not all. So if you're going to get in engineering and that other thing, make sure that it's actually a legitimate degree, okay? And obviously you want to do that before you go to that school. That would be a good thing to do early. So again, choose the best. Yes, ma'am.
For that last thing, does that apply to foreign schools?
That's a question I don't know the answer to. My guess would be that I think ABET is American Board of Education Training or something like that. So my guess would be it doesn't apply. Accreditation, okay, sorry, thank you. Yeah, I actually don't know the answer to that, I'm sorry. Yeah, but Google it. Okay, all right, next please. So finally, what are you gonna do after your degree, aside from get a job and go get an apartment or whatever you're gonna do, right? So next, postgraduate studies. Does anybody here want to go into academia, go be a professor, anything like that? Good choice, no. No, so with, what I obviously have my PhD, or not obviously, but like I said, I have my PhD, so I did decide to go do postgraduate stuff. But postgraduate, getting a PhD is not for everyone because it depends on what type of job function you want to do, especially in engineering. If you just want to go enter the workforce right away, a lot of times it will work out better for you economically and in the long run, and it'll save you 5-6 years, right, to just go into the workforce. Because when I was in my PhD program, I was earning $19,000 a year on a TA scholarship, which is not a lot of money. Meanwhile, I had friends who had graduated 2 years ago who are earning, you know, in the mid-60s, in the 70s when they're in school or when they're out in the workforce, right? So if you think about that, for 4 years of them getting promotions, of them getting raises, the increase that I got when I started for having the PhD, the higher starting salary, wasn't actually that much. And if you do the area under the curve thing, right, your whole integration thing that you guys are worrying about in math, sometimes I came out on the back end of that. So it really shouldn't be an economic driven decision. It needs to be driven on what you want to do with your career. If you want to do research, if you want to do that type of stuff, project research, you're going to have a PhD generally. But if you just want to go be a normal engineer, or I shouldn't say normal engineer, that makes it sound so sad, right? But if you just want to go be an engineer that's working in industry, you don't necessarily need to waste the time and money to get that advanced degree. So again, you need to make the decision. It's not always about the highest possible degree. Okay? What can you do now, aside from start deciding what school you want, right? But what can you do now to actually get into that school? You don't need to decide today what your major is going to be. We already talked about that from a standpoint of what classes you take, right? You'll have a little bit of fluff time once you get into school. Obviously helps to know if you want to be a chemical engineer or mechanical, it helps you now to know because then you can look at the right places. But generally, you don't have to make that dead decision until about roughly into your sophomore year, okay? But what you can do right now is to start to prepare yourself for success. So start taking the right classes, take your math, your science, make sure that you get a good resume behind you. I mean, you guys it is a lot harder for you guys to get into school than it was for me. I know you guys have to have a lot better resume than it was when I got into school. So start building that resume now, right? A little preparation goes a long way towards your future success and happiness. I promise you that. Okay? Now, engineering, for those of you who decide to do it, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Engineering's tough, right? It's going to be hard when you're studying on Thursday night at 2 in the morning for a pop quiz or for the quiz or test that you have at 8 a.m. on Friday, and all of your friends in business school are out partying because they don't have class on Friday, right? That stinks. It also stinks that when you have your thermo test and the average in the class is a 19%, that stings a little bit, right? Engineering is tough. But the reason that engineering is so respected as a field is because it's hard, right? Once you get through, when you get your Princeton engineering degree, they're gonna be like, man, he's the man, right? You wanna hire that guy. And even not in an engineering field, they'd be like, man, he made it through Princeton engineering, that guy's made us some good stuff, right? And that's the same concept, right? Once Dean gets his engineering degree, he's going to be wanted by a lot of different people, even not for engineering stuff, just because he made it through. Okay, so it's hard, but you guys, there's a ton of people out there who have engineering degrees, ton of people every year who graduate. People can do it. You guys are probably smarter than those guys, and you can do it too. Okay, just stick with it. All right, the last thing I want to plug is what they were talking about earlier, and the flyers are up there if you want it, and I'll answer questions after class. But second semester, I believe we start in February. I teach a class here at Sunset on Tuesday nights, and it is called Introduction to Basic Concepts in Engineering. So what we do, this is not simply a come in and get you guys excited about engineering class. We're going to, of course, briefly talk about what all the different engineerings are, but I'm actually going to give you guys a head start on what you guys are going to see for those first 1 to 1.5 years of education in college. Okay, we're going to talk about not just math, not just science, but we're going to start talking about the problem aspect and how we're actually going to apply that towards problem solving. Okay, so if you have any interest in this, if you have the free time in second semester, you can sign up for this class. I take 20 students this semester. I don't see anybody in here who's taken my class. We had one in the last session. But I'm sure maybe you know friends around who've taken it. So if you have any interest, I'd love to have you. Again, please ask me any questions that you want at the end. I think that's it. So does anybody have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
What are the requirements to get into the class?
So what I look for, specifically I'm looking for sophomores and juniors. I do take freshmen. Every now I take exceptional freshmen. Seniors, we're not looking for you guys primarily because you guys have already decided what you're going to do with your lives, right? So it's not going to do me a ton of good to bring him in and tell him, you know, what it's like to be an engineer because he's sold, he's done, right? He's in. So primarily looking for sophomores and juniors. I do require physics. You have to have you have to be enrolled, you have to be taking physics right now. And I ask for, or not right now, but you have to have completed physics or be in it. Yeah, sorry. I saw your face there. But so you need physics. Physics is a must. I need people who understand that when I push on somebody, when I push on Dean, he's going to push back at the same rate, right? I need somebody who understands that. Chemistry also, I ask for chemistry. We can get through about 2/3 of the class without understanding chemistry. But once we get into materials engineering, chemistry becomes very, very, very important because we're looking at things at the atomic level, right? So that's the ideal student. Now, like I said, I have taken freshmen before. We had a mixed experience last year with the freshmen, so I'm going to be a little more stringent this year on the freshmen that I take. So just be aware of that. But like I said, the class is capped at 20, so please get your applications in. I will be here next Tuesday in this same spot, hopefully wearing different clothes. Hopefully. We'll see. But I'll be here next week to talk to you and give you kind of the full intro session. Yes?
I just remember last year, was there a grade requirement? I can't remember.
I asked that you get a B or higher in those classes. Yeah.
And if you're taking, for chemistry, I took stuff from last year,
Mhm.
I'm also taking IB Chem right now.
Mhm.
Can I use last year's grade? Because we don't have it in right now.
Yeah, and then the other on the application, I also ask you to write IP in progress if you don't have a grade for that class yet. I mean, I'm not a crazy person. I get that, you know, you might not have a grade until class is done, right? So no worries. I'd love to have you if you're interested. Sounds maybe like you're interested. So let's chat after if you want to. Okay. Do I have any other questions? Okay. With that,